If you look in the history of Okinawan karate, you're going to see a variety of names. Some notable ones being Funakoshi Kichin, Itosu Anko, Miyagi Chojin. Different names are going to come up, but one name that you'll start to see a lot more when you, especially as you focus on the practical side of karate and some strong thoughts on the focus in fighting, is Motobu Choki. Motobu was fairly controversial, especially when it came to Funakoshi. So today, let's take this controversial guy, the controversial topic of kata as it pertains to self-defense study, and let's see what Motobu thought about kata. Hey, what's up? I'm Ken. This is kenfuTV. Every week I release videos on the martial arts, philosophy, training, technique, all this different stuff. And today we're talking about kata. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, hit that like if you like this video and content like this. So recently I've been reading this book. This one's the English translation done by Patrick McCarthy and his wife Yuriko. In it, I ran across this segment. It kind of stood out to me. So this is Motobu talking about how teaching should take place. This is from the section, if you own this copy, it's on page 80. This is from the section called What to Know About Training. In it, he says, teaching should take place in the following order. It is important to explain what karate is and what it is not. Then, what one should know about physical practice should follow this. Posturing, forward and backward foot movement should then come next. Gradually, evasiveness can also be introduced. Teaching how to use the clenched fists, striking with the elbows and kicking with the feet, along with deflection, trapping, and blocking, follow this. When these points are learned satisfactorily, kata can then be taught. When one is proficient at kata, sparring can be introduced. There's a lot to unpack there. Let's look at it piece by piece. So very first, he thought posturing and forward and backward foot movement should be the most important thing. Going by this order, I'm calling this the foundation. He's teaching this first. Anything taught first is typically the foundational elements. Posturing and footwork. How to move forward and back. Okay, I can definitely agree with this. I find that this is really important. The idea of structure, having good posture, and the different shapes a posture can be made into, can do to your opponent, to their balance, to their structure, to their ability to be moved, is really, really important. And then forward and backward foot movement, which could be interpreted both as moving into and out of range, as well as moving around your opponent for things like throws, things like that. Being able to off balance and make an opponent unstable. Okay, so far so good. This makes sense. Start first, stances and footwork. Stances and footwork. It sounds pretty typical. Gradually, evasiveness should be taught. So, okay, now we're starting to talk about the idea of distance, timing, and the ability to move in and out of the way. The Miyagi defense, not Miyagi Chojin, but the guy who carried the Miyagi name in the Karate Kid. He said in the movies, best defense, no be there. And so I've always loved that. I call it the Miyagi defense. And I speak of it often in class because it is the most important thing. If you are where you can get hit, you will get hit. So it doesn't matter how good your technique is if you were made unconscious during the first thing, right? Not that every hit's gonna make you unconscious, but first you should know how to get out of the way. Move. Don't just stand there. They intended to hit you or do whatever they were doing to you where you were, so don't be there. So evasiveness, how do I move around? How do I make sure that I've got the ability to manage what you're trying to do while also creating opportunities for the things that I might want to do? I think that's really, really important. And sometimes we can rush into different ways of managing, striking and blocking and all this kind of stuff when the most important thing is first just figure out how to move, how to not stay stationary. Look at boxers and how good they are at managing fighting through head movement. Something I've been paying a lot of attention to lately because I think it's so critical that you look at movement and how it can prevent damage to you in a situation like that. Huge, huge. So definitely I'm on board. Then comes next, teaching how to use clenched fists, striking with the elbows and the feet. So what have we done so far? First, we figured out how to have good posture. I'll call them stances, but I have different takes on stances anyway. But good stances, good ability, good structure, and the ability to move back and forth. Then adding in evasiveness, which I'm gonna assume has to cover things like moving to angles and getting around behind people, that kind of stuff. Managing distance, managing timing, huge. Then after that, striking. It's a logical progression and I can really like the pragmatic approach that it has. First, understand how to be of good structure. Then learn how to move your structure around. Then learn how to strike from that structure, from that place that you move to. This all makes a lot of sense to me. So let's keep going. Then in addition to that, it starts to add deflection, trapping, and blocking. So notice first he moved into striking. I find this to point directly to the idea of movement and evasion. So if I can move to a place where you can't hurt me, if I take away your tools, then I have the ability to hit you without having to block something, right? So if your movement allows you to get to a place of opportunity, strike from that place. Then a little bit later, okay, if you weren't able to get entirely to there, or the fight continues, right? It wasn't a one-punch knockout, something like that. Then you also are probably going to need to know how to deflect blows, trap limbs so that you can get to your target, and maybe even block things. Again, this progression makes a lot of sense in the idea that it's going from a really good situation, having good understanding of your body, knowing how to move in relation to your environment, knowing how to fire strikes from good positioning, and then knowing how to manage strikes that are coming in from somebody else, strikes, grapples, whatever. Karate was a grappling art, so things like takedowns and stuff like that definitely, I believe, are managed in the same idea. Managing your range and then managing blocking attempts to just take your balance and throw you or secure you in some way. I believe all of that is included in what he's saying here. But then notice last, Kata is taught. Now this is completely backwards. It's backwards from the way that I was taught, it's backwards from the way that my instructor was taught, and it's backwards from the way a lot of places teach. There was usually a jump, right? You had stances and footwork, jumps, and maybe some striking, jump straight into kata, and then from kata into technique. Well, I believe he's already kind of started covering the idea of technique. That's already been established. Move, hit, block, trap, fight. That's where we're at. Then, okay, now it's time for kata. So if you're someone who believes in what the old master said about the idea of kata being a recording of the things that you were taught, I see that this is the appropriate place to place kata. It's harder to do. In a larger class, it's easier to start with kata first, and I think that's where some of this shift took place, is when you have more and more people, then it's easier to get everybody knowing the fundamental movements of the kata and then translate them, rather than first teaching to fight and then doing that. I believe there's been some differences there because of that. You know, in this time period, the way that it was set up is you weren't training in large groups. You were training a couple people, that sort of thing. So you could spend time fighting with good oversight from somebody who could make sure that it went the right way and you were learning the right things. I think that it would be important for us to find a way to build that back in if we can, so that we don't lead people to mistakenly believe kata is the important thing. It is important. I believe that it's important, but it's not the important thing. It's our way of remembering the important thing. It's our way of remembering the skill that we were taught. And again, that's shown in this methodology that he's using. Here's all the things that you need to know. And now you're starting to remember them, record them, and then get reps in, practice through kata. Your solo training, kata was there for that. Kata was there for your solo training. As you work those movements, you can work them full power. You can really kind of dial in and become in tune with what your body is doing for these movements. Try to perfect how your posture is, how your weight moves, and then apply it to a person. So by taking what you took from working with somebody, then drilling it solo and then putting it back, you can become a well-rounded and very proficient fighter. We do it all the time. I'll go back to boxing because it's easy. Most people have an understanding of boxing and what training looks like. You've got somebody who's been taught to punch. All right, here's your punch, here's your jab, here's your cross, here's your hook, uppercut, etc., etc. And you get some work with the body, right? But you're spending a lot of time working on the bag so that you can hit hard, so that you can practice explosiveness and using your body as effectively as you can, and then put it back in with a person so that you can train it live, and it's going to become more rough, it's going to become more ragged, but you're starting to apply its timing and manage another person. But first you had all that time with the bag to not have all those distractions, those things that could confuse you on where you should focus while you just worked on developing power, developing striking, and then deal with the chaos that comes next. I feel that that's what's happening here. Learn how to do these things, get a good comfort. Then once you start understanding how to do that, and I believe when he's talking about striking and elbow and kicking, that you're dealing with both a person, and there were apparatuses for doing it, the makiwara, things like that, that was part of training. So their version of bag training, I believe, was included. Then you move into kata, where you can work on all these movements, which include more than just hitting a bag. They include actually moving your body and pantomiming the idea of throwing people, trapping people, locking people, all this kind of stuff. And then reintegrate the idea of working with a partner. Then he goes on to say that when the person becomes proficient in kata, then sparring can be taught. Here's what I think this means. I think that he means, okay, when you have been working very hard on your fundamentals, you've had time to really drill the basic functions, how to stand, how to move, how to carry your weight, how to strike, how to hit hard and with power, using different methods, makiwara training, kata training, probably some basic drilling, that kind of stuff. Then it's time to spar. It's time to deploy them in a live way, a way that makes you have to use these techniques, have to use this understanding, this method in a chaotic and unpredictable environment. This, I believe, is a really smart structure to learning, starting with the fundamentals. Writing is not really much different, right? First you learn the shapes of the letters, your structure, your form. Then you continue to work on putting them together, making those letters into words, moving those words, but then you start learning more words, different ways to do it. And later you have the ability to write your own sentences that convey your own things. They can convey anger, they can convey peace, they can convey happiness and sadness and all these things. I believe our physical movements fall right into those same categories. So what do you think? Do you think that Motobu was onto something with the design of his philosophy? Have you been trained that way? Does your training kind of match this, or do you see things different? And do you see that it fails in some ways? Be really curious to hear what other people think. I'm in the middle of reading through this book and continuing on, but I want to hear what other people think of Motobu's idea of training and how it should look. Anyway, that's it for today. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more videos like that, hit that bell so you know when they come out. I do videos every Monday, but they're not always on Monday. I've got other videos that sometimes release throughout the week. That's when you're going to see more of the technique-based stuff and that kind of thing. Otherwise, I'm Ken, this is kenfuTV, and I'll catch you in the next one.